Hello darlings, it's me, Freddie Uranus, and today we are going to be talking about books. No, don't click off this video because we're talking about fun books. Fantasy books, specifically books to replace Harry Potter. If you don't know what's going on in the Harry Potter fandom right now, then I would like to know what planet you live on because I would like to move there. Because ever since finding out that JK Rowling, the author of Harry Potter, is basically a huge transphobe, my life hasn't been the same. Now, I did make a reaction video right after JK Rowling came out with her huge transphobic essay that really started this whole thing, and in the video I said I wasn't really sure how it was going to affect my love of the Harry Potter wizarding world. I wasn't sure if I could separate the art from the artist, as so many other Harry Potter fans have chose to do. But now it has become clear, after she has really dug her feet into this position and come out with even more horrible, hateful comments, that I can't enjoy Harry Potter anymore. Like, whenever I just even open up my Harry Potter mobile game, I think about her and I think about the things she said, and I don't think that's what any fiction writer wants. And unfortunately, that's just what has happened in my case. Of course, there's the added knowledge that I don't want to contribute to her and her influence in any way. But I do want to make it very clear that this video is in no way trying to make any moral statement as to whether you should or should not continue to indulge in the wizarding world of Harry Potter. I mean, I personally think it is a super personal choice when choosing to boycott something or anything of that nature. That's completely up to you, and I have just come to the decision that I simply cannot enjoy Harry Potter anymore, which of course has left a huge void in my life, and that's saying something considering I only started reading the Harry Potter books this time last year. So as part of my healing process, I have decided that I wanted to branch out and see if there were other fantasy books that would kind of heal that part, that emptiness that I feel ever since I have stopped consuming Harry Potter media. Now, one thing that I was super glad to learn was that modern fantasy is very much alive and well. Like, I kind of thought it was like Lord of the Rings and then Harry Potter and that was it. Well, and Game of Thrones, of course, which I am a massive fan of and am sporting a t-shirt of right now. So it has been really fun and really enlightening to kind of see this whole new world of modern fantasy and what has opened up to be a really interesting field of media that I didn't even know existed. So that being said, here are 4 books that I have read, well, listened to. I've actually listened to all of these 4 on audiobooks because audiobooks are amazing and I love them. They have similarities in some aspects to Harry Potter, but they aren't young adult fantasy. Yes, there's the kicker. There's no Percy Jacksons in here. No offense to the Percy Jackson fans. I've heard it's a very good series. Maybe I'll check it out. But these are all a little bit more mature. Nothing really obscene. But these are for the more mature Harry Potter fans who want something maybe a little bit more adult. Now, obviously, none of these are going to completely take the place of Harry Potter in my mind, or probably yours either. Because let's face it, Harry Potter was and is still special. I will remember the times of reading Harry Potter really fondly, you know, before JK Rowling ruined it for me. But, you know, these 4 books have personally just helped me feel not so empty inside. So let me tell you a little bit about these books. I will tell you why you might like them if you're a Harry Potter fan, what you might not like about them, and my personal feelings regarding them. Okay, let's get started. So the first one on this list is going to be probably the most like Harry Potter, just in terms of like the world building, and that is because it is actually the only low fantasy book I have on this list. If you're new to fantasy, no worries, let me explain. High fantasy refers to basically when you are in another world. So Tolkien is very much high fantasy. Game of Thrones is high fantasy. Anything that takes place in a magical, mystical realm outside of, you know, the real world. Low fantasy is when the story takes place in the real world, but there are mystical elements thrown in. So a perfect example is Harry Potter, because it takes place in the real world, but there are wizards in the real world and they have to keep it secret. So in that respect, this book is very much like that, and that is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. So this book is very much like Harry Potter in that it features adolescents who have, you know, the abilities to do great magical things. The main difference is that in Harry Potter, the adults are working to foster a nurturing and educational atmosphere to help these young adults come into their powers and use them justly. Wherein, as in The Night Circus, the adults are just kind of using the young people as pawns. It's much more cynical and a little bit darker. So let me tell you the true story of how I came to find this book. So I was in my post-Harry Potter funk, and I was just scrolling on Audible, and I saw this book, and it was titled The Night Circus, and I saw narrated by Jim Dale. Now, if you happen to listen to Harry Potter on audiobook like I did, then you will probably recognize that name, because Jim Dale is one of the 2 people who narrated Harry Potter into audiobook form, the other being Stephen Fry, who I've heard also did an amazing job. I associated Jim Dale's voice with the Harry Potter characters almost as much as I associated Daniel Radcliffe or Emma Watson with the Harry Potter characters, because that's just how integral the role of an audiobook narrator can be. So when I saw that Jim Dale was the narrator for The Night Circus, I immediately bought that up, because I could not let that passed me by. I didn't even read the summary. I just saw the night Circus. I thought that sounded cool. Jim Dale. I was like, done, sold. And I'm really glad that I listened to it because it was a really, really fun ride. I will say that the book as a whole tended to kind of get slow in the middle, but the beginnings and the end were super, super fascinating. The world was super enriching and just really beautiful. And they utilized second person, which is super cool to me. Now, they did it sparingly, so don't let that freak you out. Don't let that deter you. I think that they did it really, really well to really get you feeling like you were at the night circus, and the ambience was absolutely amazing. Now, the story has been bought for a film adaptation. I am very hopeful that we will get to see that, but knowing Hollywood, you know, it could go either way. It could kind of get stuck in production hell, especially since COVID has thrown everything off. But I really do hope that we do get to see it on screen. Now, one thing that might detour you from this, if you are a big Harry Potter fan, is this is a one and done series. It is just one book. There are no sequels. I don't see there being any sequels to this book. And I mean, like, one of the things I loved about Harry Potter was that it was such a long-running series that I was able to learn more and more about the characters, learn more and more about the lore. So if that's what you're looking for specifically, don't worry, you will find it on this list, but not in this book, unfortunately. The second book that I want to recommend is The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. Now, in contrast to the last book where there was only one in the series, this book happens to be the longest running fantasy series of all time to date. Brandon Sanderson is really trying to break that record, but I don't know if he'll do it anytime soon. So yes, this is part of the Wheel of Time series. This is a high fantasy series. It takes place in its own special fantasy world, and of course that may not sound a lot like Harry Potter, but let me just sell it to you. Like Harry Potter, it definitely uses the chosen one trope, you know, the whole like you were born to be the savior of the universe type thing, but it does it in a sort of twist. It's kind of a more realistic approach to if, you know, the fate of the world actually were on your shoulders and how bleak and terrifying that would be, and also if people were after you because you could do certain things. And it's actually a really unique approach to a trope that's super overdone. In fact, I think all four of these books kind of utilize that trope into some degree. Maybe not so much the first one, but definitely these last three do. There is also a Dark Lord. If you are into just Dark Lords who just have like unlimited power and they're just unlimitedly evil and you just want to hate them and feel good about it, then this probably will be a book you might like because there's plenty of that in there. But the real reason I am super excited about this book and I want to share it with you is that it is becoming a TV series. Amazon Prime has started adapting the first book into a TV series. Now, obviously, I hope that they can do it justice. Adaptations can go sideways, but I think what we learned with A Game of Thrones was that probably when we get into these like super long fantasy epics, TV series are probably going to be a little bit more conducive to storytelling rather than trying to condense it all into an hour-and-a-half movie or 2-hour movie. So I am super, super excited about that. I just finished the second book in the series and I am reading the third book in physical copy. So yeah, I don't just listen to books on audiobook, but they are really convenient. Now, the cons, obviously, it's high fantasy, like the other two in this list will be. So there's not the whole, it's London, and, you know, they're riding on the bus and stuff. It's very much its own world, its own cultures, but I think that's where this book really shines, and this whole series really shines. Robert Jordan has created kind of probably the most unique cultures, I think, in fantasy, and they kind of take aspects from different cultures around the world. It's not just like your typical medieval European, you know, knights in shining armor and dragons sort of thing. There are a lot of different cultures and a lot of different enemies and things of that nature. The third book on this list is Dune by Frank Herbert. Now, I'm gonna be honest, Dune took me a little bit to get into. Actually took me 2 tries, but I forced myself to get through the opening and the first, you know, probably 3-4 hours of the book. I really didn't like it, but then when I got to kind of the middle section of the book, I started to understand what was going on, and I really did start to like it. So Frank Herbert has created this really complex world with a lot of different idiosyncrasies, and he does not hold your hand when introducing you to these different concepts, and it can be very, very difficult to understand what is going on, especially, you know, at the beginning of the book when you're just thrown in there, because there are lots of words that are unfamiliar, lots of technologies that are unfamiliar, and the magic system in it, and I do consider it a magic system because there are a lot of mystical elements in it. That's also very kind of confusing as well. Now, this one also really plays on the chosen one trope, so if that's something that you enjoyed in Harry Potter, then Dune might be your thing. Also, there are several sequels written by Frank Herbert himself, and then there are several sequels that were written after his death by other people. I've heard that the ones written by him are fairly good, and that the ones not written by him not so good, but of course I haven't read them, so I cannot give you my opinion on that. Now, Dune is a super culturally significant book. It, I mean, really helped shape fantasy and sci-fi for basically a generation to come, and you've probably heard of the infamous movie adaptation. I have not seen it. I do intend to watch it because I've heard it's so bad. But what's really, really cool is that we are getting a star-studded adaptation. Timothy Chalamet is in it, Zendaya is in it, so many different people are in it, and the trailer looks super, super good. So that is scheduled to come out in October of 2021. Now, if you're really looking for something like Harry Potter, this might not be the book for you because it has a very huge lean to science fiction. It's kind of a debate whether it's more of a science fiction book or more of a fantasy book, but obviously it has aspects of both to it, having both a lot of technology and space travel, but also a lot of mystical and unexplained elements. So I say give Dune a chance. I mean, it may be a little bit difficult to get into at first, but I think it will be well worth it, especially when we see that new adaptation. Now, last but certainly not least is Mistborn: The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. I considered another book by Brandon Sanderson for this list, Elantris, which is the first book that I read or listened to by him. But this book is much closer to Harry Potter, and I think it's just a much better book in general. What you might like in this book that you liked in Harry Potter is that it both follows the story of these really unfortunate children who grew up in really horrible circumstances, and their life gets better basically when they realize that they can do mysterious and magical things. This is a trilogy, and then it has another trilogy that follows it, and it's supposed to have another trilogy that follows that, but that has yet to be written. But I'm sure Brandon Sanderson will get to it because he writes like a maniac. So I expect there to be plenty of lore. The magic system is one of the coolest I think I have really seen. It's definitely a bit different. So one thing that I really noticed about this book and its connection to Harry Potter is that both of them have kind of underlying racial themes, which Dune does to a degree as well, but these two, you know, especially. In Harry Potter, obviously we have the whole analogy of the mudbloods, or am I allowed to say that? Or the non-pure blood, which is in wizards, versus the pure bloods. And then you have, of course, Voldemort, who basically wants to start basically an ethnic cleansing of sorts. It's all very much rooted in kind of this analogy of the Holocaust, which isn't new by any means. I mean, like, to be honest, a lot of fictional fantasy worlds, especially the darker ones, kind of tend to take a lot of inspiration from the Holocaust and from specifically Adolf Hitler, because he is the ultimate villain. And Mistborn really has this same underlying theme of, you know, being in a racial or ethnic group that is really being subjugated and oppressed by the other group. Now, Mistborn may have a movie in the works. It's again hard to tell. Nothing has been like concretely announced as far as I know, so not sure about that, but there is attempts to make something along that line. And I think this would make a perfect movie and really a perfect video game, the novel really reads like a video game, and the action scenes are super, super cool. Like, honestly, this may be my favorite book on the list. I don't know. It's hard to pick because I do like the others as well. Now, one thing that you might be thrown off by is that this is not only a fantasy book, but it's also kind of post-apocalyptic. It's kind of like if Harry Potter were to take place in a world after Voldemort had taken power and had assumed, you know, control over the wizarding world, and Harry Potter was basically supposed to like overthrow him. That is basically the premise of Mistborn, but add thieving and heist jobs to that, and yeah, you get a really great but weird concept that I don't think anyone but the genius of Brandon Sanderson could come up with. So I definitely recommend Mistborn. It's probably one of the more accessible ones. Especially if you are a younger reader, this might be a little bit more straightforward, especially when you compare it to some of the other ones like Dune, which is super kind of dense and heavy to get through at times. So I really hope that this video piqued your interest in one or more of these books. And, you know, I hope that they can help you through this difficult time when, you know, basically the sanctity of Harry Potter has been threatened. If you're interested in more book videos, then leave a comment down below and I will definitely get on to making those. I know this channel has been pretty anime heavy for the past year since I created it. So I'm going to be trying to integrate more content, more nerdy content, and I hope you really like fantasy because I sure do. And with that, I will say goodbye, darlings.